Hey, you wild women, welcome back to a wild take and another episode of Into the Wild. I am your host, Renee Warren. I am so stoked to be here for many reasons, but one is I just love recording solo episodes. We have become a data first company, meaning now every single episode that we plan, every single episode that's recorded, the topics go through our analytics machine, this fake machine that we created. However, we've collected almost 5 years of data on the type of content that people want. And turns out y'all love my solo episodes. So here I am with my crystal in hand, recording another solo for you. This time talking about the inner critic. So the inner critic is that little voice in your head that tells you not to do something or to do something or to overthink something. That's like me. If you're anything like me, raise your hand. It's that little voice that says you're not good enough. This is too early. You're not smart enough. You're not deserving of success. I have been battling with this inner critic my whole life, but it's been getting louder and louder each week because I am hosting my first big event. You know, the Pink Skirt Project, June 12th, Kelowna, BC, thepinkskirtproject.com. If you haven't got your ticket yet, but the point being that I'm doing something different, unique. It is causing me a lot of fear. Not so much stress, like stress from an excitement perspective, but the critic in my head keeps telling me, who are you to be this person on stage motivating 350 women in a room? Who are you to launch this event? Who are you to have people fly in from all over the world? The reality is that, and we're going to talk about this too in creating like your reward bank. We all have the opportunity and the possibility within us to do those things that are the moonshot. I've been wanting to do this event forever, and I am finally doing it because I was able to tell that inner critic to shut the F up because she is not going to be controlling me or my conversations with myself any longer. Today, I want to talk to you about how to recognize, confront, and ultimately silence that inner voice in your head that's holding you back from your first $1 million year or publishing a book or going on that trip that you've always wanted to go on. Because let's be honest, as female entrepreneurs, as women, as mothers, as partners, our biggest obstacle is not competitors. It's not the market. It is often ourselves. You know it. I know it. So if you want to hear how I dim and mute and turn off that inner critic, tune in. Let's first talk about what actually makes up that inner critic. Now, if you're as old as I am, you might know there used to be these two dudes that used to critique movies called Siskel and Ebert. Oh my gosh, is that their names? And they would give it none, one, or two thumbs up. If a movie was good, you'd get 2 thumbs up. If it was okay, you'd get 1. If it wasn't good, you wouldn't get any. That's how they analyzed movies. And it was a big deal. So if they said a movie was 2 thumbs up, then it must be good. But that's like your inner critic. It's these little ideas. It's like a little person in your head giving you 1 thumb up or 2 thumbs up or no thumbs up or thumbs down, saying you can't do it. You shouldn't do this. Who are you to do it? These thoughts, these negative thought patterns can come from several areas in your life. One could be maybe childhood trauma or childhood messaging, belief systems, values and homes that you grew up in, maybe the people you're with, the people you work with, your friend circle. These could be past failures and rejections. That is huge for me and a doozy for me. I hated sales calls for the longest time because if a client said no or a prospect said no, instead of it being what it is, face value, no, it's just not the right fit, I internalized that. And we'll also talk about that later. A inner critic can be societal expectations, could be some things that were passed down generation to generation, thinking that because the way it's always gone, it has to go this way. One thing that I had to fight for so long was against my own inner critic, thinking that I had to parent my kids the way I was parented, or that I have to run a business the way that so-and-so ran her business because she was so successful. So if she did it that way, then I should do it that way. And that's how I'll be successful, which isn't true. The other place that it shows up, and gosh, probably the most for me, is this: perfectionism. I set myself to impossibly high standards, thinking I can achieve that. Here's what happens when we set really high standards for what we want, really high standards for anything in our life, from how our house might look to how to cook a meal to how to host an event, all this stuff. There's part of it that we know subconsciously, maybe even you consciously, that you're setting yourself these high standards, knowing you can't achieve it, so that it's a great scapegoat when you fail. You know what I mean? My goal is to fill my Pink Skirt project, excuse me, with 350 women. That's a pretty high standard, given that I have not hosted an event this big before ever in my life. And I know that a lot of people that are hosting these events, they do it as a way to bring a community that already exists together. For a sales funnel, it could be like a sales event where they're in there. Sure, it's a great event, but they're also trying to sell something on the back end. And maybe I will. There's actually some really cool things that we're working on. But anyways, when you create these high standards, essentially what you're doing is you're telling yourself, I know this is probably not achievable. I'm going to do this moonshot anyway. That way, if I decide not to do this anymore or I get too fearful, then I can just bow out and I'll be okay because at least I tried. And that's really not a great mentality going into anything that you're trying to achieve in life. The other thing with the inner critic is that it gets louder, which is crazy. It gets louder the more you succeed. Imposter syndrome is one thing that intensifies as you level up your success. As the stakes get higher, and you feel like you're accomplishing more and you become more visible and influential, there's a larger sense of responsibility. So sometimes that inner critic will come out and say, you should not do this because that means you're going to have more people watching you. That's what my inner critic sounds like, that little voice saying that if you state an opinion online about something you believe in, that other people are going to come at you. It's like if you talk about religion or politics, which are two things we don't really talk about publicly because we just know what that comes with. That's either one way or the other. But the inner critic will say, don't do that, or do that, or understand what are the consequences if you do this, what are the repercussions. Essentially, the inner critic is like this little gnome that sits on your brain, keeping you safe and comfortable, trying to keep you in the familiar. It's a lot of things we don't do in a life because we're so afraid of stepping into something that is new to us. Because if you're like, you want to gain 2 pounds of lean muscle this year, which I learned today is possible, but gaining 5 pounds of lean muscle is almost impossible for a woman like me. That was my moonshot. So I don't want to fail. So I lowered my lean muscle mass goal. However, the fear, now I forgot what I was going to say, the fear of trying to achieve that 2 pounds of muscle. It's like this little gnome that sits on your brain saying, you can't do that. Why even try? Because that means that you have to go to the gym 6 days a week. You have to lift, weights this times a week. This is the food you have to eat. Here's the protein you have to intake. Here's the things you can't do. And so all this stuff is new. It's a big life change. So why do it? Because I'm comfortable where I am. But if I want to achieve my goal, I got to take that little inner critic and be like, shut up, please. Just shut up. The other thing about the inner critic is there's actually more of a cost to listening to this little voice in your head than there is actually pushing them aside. Because you miss opportunities, because maybe you don't feel ready. You downplay your achievements or your expertise. Do you do that as much as I do? You're paralyzed by perfectionism that it prevents you from even doing anything or moving forward or making progress. And then you're constantly exhausted, not because of your hormones, but that could be a reason why too. But you're constantly exhausted because you're just draining your energy with self-doubt. That's what I do all the time. So here's the thing. This wild take, I want to teach you a framework to help silence that inner critic. Also note, every single person has it. Every single person goes through this every single day, multiple times a day. You think about all those conversations you have with yourself, all the decisions you have to make. Whenever there is something presented to you and you have to make a decision, guess what shows up? The inner critic, the person who has the most self-doubt, the least amount of confidence is the person who will be affected the most by this inner critic. So there's a 5-step framework that I use to help shut that person up. What you need to do first, write this down. If you're driving, don't write this down, but come back to this. The first thing you need to do is name it to tame it. Give this little thing a name. Mine is not original, but because I use this term all the time, I call her Debbie Downer. When Debbie shows up, I know that I'm going to be critiqued. When Debbie shows up, I know I'm going to be doubted. And I don't like Debbie. Now, if your name is Debbie, I like you. But if you're Debbie in my brain, I don't like you. You need to create distance between you and Debbie, you and your inner critic. How this works is there's power in externalization and objectivity when it comes to your little person in your head. So this refers to the psychology of creating distance between yourself and your negative thoughts. When you externalize your inner critic by giving it a name, like Debbie Downer, you're separating those critical thoughts from your core identity. You're not the person. You aren't Debbie. So instead of thinking of I am inadequate, you shift to Debbie Downer is saying I'm inadequate. So this creates that psychological distance. You know what I mean? So instead of saying I can't launch a podcast or publish a book, you change it to Debbie doesn't have much faith in me launching a podcast or publishing a book. So now it's like, it's not you. It's that doubt in your head that's telling you you can't do it, but you don't identify with you being it. You're just thinking it. So Debbie once showed up and said, who are you to have a big event? And I listened to her for years until finally I said, screw you, Debbie. I'm doing this anyway. And she was like, what's going on? And she's now in for the ride. We are on a journey together and she keeps showing up. And Debbie says on a daily basis now when I'm presented with new opportunities, really cool things and things that are exhausting and I'm full of fear, she's like, ha, I told you so. You know those I told you so friends or those I told you so siblings or relatives? They're not fun. They're not fun to be around because they like to be right. They like to prove themselves right. So your inner critic will be there trying to prove themselves right all the time. You just got to show off a little bit, be a little uncomfortable and do the damn thing anyway. So while you're in there, while you're having this war in your head with your own version of a Debbie Downer, you need to gather evidence against their critiques. That's number 2. Gather the evidence. Document your wins. Look how far you've come. Create that proof portfolio. Use data to encounter these emotional reactions. For me, if it has anything to do with my body and I'm feeling like puffy or something, I go back to the pictures of me in a bikini and I look at it and I think to myself, hey, that's actually not that bad. And so I have to remind myself that underneath this temporary puffiness, that body exists. Or if I go back to a failed sales call, I have to remind myself that I have many times built an extremely profitable business and that there's a lot of people that said yes to working with me. Even though there's a lot of people that said no, there's still more people that said yes. I have to go back to the fact that I've published a book, that I've launched a top podcast, that I have an incredible marriage, that I'm having a sold out business event, that I've monetized my podcast, that people are hiring me to be their confidence coach, their business coach, their get me to that next level, Renee coach. There are people that I know would catch me when I fall. So there's so much evidence out there, and especially for you and all the little wins you have on a daily, weekly, annual basis to prove to your version of Debbie that you deserve greatness and you need to go after it. So if you find yourself in these other moments of like having an argument with Debbie, the third thing you have to do is reframe the narrative. To transform it from I'm not ready for this to I'm learning as I go. Anytime I pitched a sponsor to sponsor my event, some of them who didn't know me asked for evidence of how I did the last time, and I was just completely honest with them. I didn't lie. I said, this is the first time we're doing this. But here are the speakers, here are the other sponsors, and here's what the day is going to look like. And you would be FOMO not showing up. You'd be missing out on some of the coolest opportunities. So when I'm reframing that conversation in my head to going from I'm not ready to I'm learning as I go, I just tell people, all right, say, hey, this is the first time I'm doing this. I don't know what I knew. I don't know what I don't know, and I'm learning. But I can tell you one thing, it's going to be an incredible day. And then you have to shift to the I might fail to I'm learning something valuable. For me, it's like the failure maybe for the Pink Skirt Project annual event or inaugural event could be that I don't sell out. And that was kind of like a promise to sponsors. Or that something catastrophic happens during the day. But this is all catastrophizing. Is that the way you say it? By thinking always worst case scenario, that is the Debbie showing up. As opposed to being, hey, like telling myself, Renee, you've already sold 30% of your tickets. Your VIP tickets sold out like that, and there's a wait list for more. The sponsors that you want have showed up and they've already paid. The people that you want in their room have already not only bought their tickets, but they're bringing friends. They're bringing groups of people. So it's you have to reflect on those little wins and the big wins to keep moving forward. And the most important thing on reframing this narrative is this. Replace the who am I to do this with the who am I not to do this. I genuinely believe that there are no new ideas, there's no new innovation, there's no new thoughts in our life. There's just versions and iterations of these thoughts. And that when you come up with an idea, it's God's spirit or source coming through you saying, hey, here's an opportunity of something you can work on. Here's a focus or a purpose you can have in your life. And that same idea has already been delivered to thousands, if not millions of people. And it's just got to land on the right person at the right time for them to believe that they are the ones to see this through. You know what I mean? So for me in running my event, it was the same thing. I didn't have a 5 or 10 year plan for what this event is going to be. I don't have a detailed sales projection strategy to present to a VC for how this event is going to come to fruition. It was a vision of mine since 2017 that I finally acted on now in 2025. That's a big gap. Many things that came into my life that affected that, but the biggest point was the Debbie Downer kept saying, who are you to do this, Renee? Who are you? And I finally said, Debbie, who am I not to do this? I can think of all the ways this could go wrong. There are a lot, but I can also think of the millions of ways this could go so well. And that's what I'm going to focus on. Because the community that is showing up, the community that is flying in from all over the world are so excited to be in that room, not because of me, but because of something that we are collectively creating together. And I know this deep down to be true. So even though Debbie shows up, you have these thoughts or however you want to call your inner critic, you have to implement the 24-hour rule. So sometimes you need to actually sit in that doubt because sometimes that doubt's a warning. And especially if you're one to believe in your gut instinct, if there's this feeling, I say go with that, go with the gut. But sometimes it's just your perfectionism. It's just your lack of confidence or the lack of evidence that you can do this that stops you from making that progress. So give yourself some time to not overthink it, but to really think it and ask yourself, your head, your heart, or your gut, what has the strongest feeling? If it's your intuition saying don't do it, then don't do it. But if your head is always trying to calculate stuff and you're like, but this person and then this thing and it's going to be expensive or it's going to take too much time, don't overthink it. And then go with the answer that's right for you. There is the action despite doubt principle. Just say yes and do it. Figure it out as you go. And then there's emotion. There's motion that creates emotion, and not the other way around. So the motion that creates emotion, meaning that when you say yes to doing something and you actually take that first step, sometimes you don't know how much work is involved until you actually start doing the work, because you can have all the beautiful plans and playbooks and books and podcasts right in front of you, but you don't actually know what it's going to feel like or be like until you start doing it. You could be training for an Ironman. I've never done that, but my husband is, and he's running his fifth Ironman in a few months. So I see the amount of training that goes into it. But for somebody who's never done it before, they say yes, understanding it's very heavy, but then they're not able to build the emotion until they start actually going through the motions of training for the Ironman. Same with business. You start a business, whatever kind of business it is, looks good on the outside, idea's great, it's fun, you're finally getting your idea out there, but the emotion is creating emotion. That emotion is your doubt. You can't let your emotions stop you from moving forward. And that's why you need to snuff out your little Debbie. Say bye-bye. Then the last thing, which has been a pivotal game changer in being a successful entrepreneur, is in building your confidence squad. You need to surround yourself with people who not only see your potential, but want to see you win. The people, I will repeat this, who want to see you win. There are power in mastermind groups, accountability partners. I have my new coaching program coming out in April 2025. We'll check that out when it drops. But for me, it was creating a mastermind. I just got back from Mexico last month. I collected a group of 11, there's 11 of us, so 10 other women who I wanted to just be around. And I wanted them also to meet each other. And that mastermind now has become the place where you should see on a daily the amount of messages that we share saying, hey, here's some new copy for my landing page. Can you review? Or, hey, can you help me with boosting a social media post? Or, guys, I'm really doubting myself about this talk. Can you give me some advice? That confidence squad and that accountability group is absolutely pivotal in anything you do in life. Anything. So collect those people, support them, support each other. And then there's a point in your life too when you actually do need to hire a professional versus just relying on peers. Sometimes you need structure. Sometimes you need a coaching program or a solid container where you can just dip in, you have that expert navigate you through a certain thing in your life, and then you take action and you move on. Your friends, they want to see you succeed. Most of the time, they won't be there at the capacity in which you need, especially if you're really trying to get to the next level in business. So sometimes hiring a coach is absolutely important. And then I wrote down here, my last note is how to ask for the specific validation that you need. Oh my God, that is such a tough thing. We all are in the space where we feel the need to be validated, right? I mean, that's like kind of human nature. How can I be seen and heard? We want validation that we're great. We want validation that we're good mothers, that we're great entrepreneurs, that we're great leaders, that our team loves us. We want validation that our product and service is amazing. Yet we don't do that for ourselves. We don't actually go in and believe the work that we're doing is great. You ask a father, for the most part, if he's a good father, and what does he say? Absolutely, I'm the world's best. You ask a mother if she's a good mother, and what does she say? Nope, I'm a terrible mother. But imagine you actually started believing that you were a good mother. Imagine you actually started believing that you were a great entrepreneur. How would that change not only how you feel and show up in the world, but the whole narrative that happens in your brain on a 24-hour basis? Now, there's one real life application that I want to share with you about this inner critic. And I've shared this story before on my podcast, but if you're new here, let me tell you. December of 2023, so a year and a bit ago, my husband and I were invited to go to a really cool mastermind in Charleston, South Carolina. South Carolina. And in that room were the likes of people like, oh gosh, Jenna Kutcher, Cody Sanchez, Susie Moore, Michael Hyatt, Jenna Kutcher, Jim Quick, of so many more people. And these were people that books I've read, courses I've studied, podcasts I've binged, people I looked up to, I idolized. And there's like 30 of us sitting around a table. And I, like, going into this, first of all, I couldn't sleep for weeks leading into it because who am I? This was the story I'm telling myself. Who was I to sit in a room and give any of these people advice on how to do business? Who was I? These are people that mentored me, that coached me. And now I'm supposed to provide them advice on how to do business or whatever it is they were looking for. So I kept there. I showed up. It was pretty cool meeting these people. And the first day I was sweating. And we break out into these little like breakout groups. And I was put in a group with like Jenna Kutcher and Susie Moore and Bonnie Christine. And so just amazing women. And we all had this a time to talk about the one thing that we needed the most advice on in our business and life. And it came to me and I was like, oh my God, I don't know. Where do I begin? Where do I begin? Let me open up my checklist. And everyone was so sweet. Everyone was so kind. There wasn't a moment that I felt judged for being there, even though I didn't have 1 million followers in social, even though I didn't have $1 million months in my business like a lot of these people did. I was there because just by the nature of me being there, that room was a better place. Thanks to Amy Porterfield for really pointing that out. Just by being there. And if you can get to this point where you're dimming your inner critic and allowing yourself to genuinely believe that just by the nature of physically being there makes the room a better place, you're like next level awakening, essentially, a next level enlightenment. Because you love yourself enough to know that you're bringing whatever it is, great energy to a conversation, into a room. So my real life application in muting that inner critic was that I deserved to be there. And it wasn't a month ago. We go back to Charleston, Dan and I, not for the mastermind, but because Cody Sanchez was recording her masterclass because of her incredible book launch. And Dan was speaking on stage, and I got to hang out in the green room one-on-one alone with Cody. And we're there for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, just chatting about life. And I brought the story up to her. And she's like, Renee, I'm so shocked. Never once for a moment I thought you thought that, because I told her about how I felt. But the ease that I had in even just being with her and telling the story and hanging out was like, it was just such a beautiful thing. So I think we all need to take time to just mute that inner critic. She's always going to be there, or maybe it's a he. And there's part of it where it's like she's actually has your safety in mind. She actually wants you to be comfortable, but also she's 100% always going to try to stop you from striving for greatness. It's almost like your number one competitor. Your number one competitor does not want you to be successful. They do not want you to come out with a new color, new style, a new flavor, new service. She wants you to go backwards. And your inner critic wants you to stay safe, stay warm, and not take the chances. So here's what I want for you to do this week. I want you to document your inner critic and the phrases that she tells you. I want you to create counter arguments, and I want you to back those by evidence. Tell her to shut up and say, here's why you're wrong. I want you to create a confidence squad. Even if these are people online that you're acquaintances with, chat them up. Say, listen, here's where I'm at in my business. I've always been inspired by you. I'm wondering if this is something that you can help me with, or we can create our own little accountability group with a couple other women. Let's do it. Then you need to identify one opportunity that you've been avoiding because of your inner critic and take one small step toward actually doing it. Remember, your inner critic gets louder when you're on the verge of something great. So take that as a thermostat. When your inner critic starts getting louder, 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 guess what's happening? It's because you're on the verge of something great. Don't let her cannibalize the potential and the possibility of what you're trying to create. Now, if you need more help in feeling confident, courageous, brave, unapologetic, and you're not busy on June 12th, come on out to Kelowna, BC for the Pink Skirt Project, thepinkskirtproject.com. I'd love to have you there. It's one day of celebrating the confidence that we all have within us. And I would just absolutely love to see you there. Check me out on Instagram, Renee_Warren, for updates about what's happening. Until next time, ladies, peace out.